JoEllen McCarthy, and I'm a lifelong learner and educator who believes in the power of read-alouds. I'm also the proud author of Layers of Learning, where I share my thinking around the ways we can use picture books to connect literacy and caring conversations. I often say that books are my co-teachers, but I know that behind the books are the inspiring authors and illustrators who serve as the real co-teachers. These mentors gift us with stories and art that can help nourish the reader, the writer, and the human in each of our students. Together, let's connect our students to the stories, the people, and the possibilities for learning on and off the pages of their books. Jamilah, thank you for joining us and welcome.
Thank you for having me. So good to be here.
I'm excited because one of the things that Jamilah and I talked about is how often teachers love getting the behind the scenes stories about a book. And so Jamilah was kind enough to offer some insight into her process as a writer and some of the things that she went through in bringing us the beautiful story of Your Name is a Song. So quick little book talk. Could you do that for us, Jamilah, just for those of us who are watching who don't know the story?
Sure. So Your Name is a Song is about a little girl who we meet at the end of her first day of school. And she is incredibly upset. She knows that she is not going to return to the school because she has gone through the whole day without anyone being able to pronounce her name correctly, not her teacher, not anyone in the school. And in fact, some of the kids have said mean things about her name, some mocking things. And so she tells her mother this, I'm not coming back here again. And the bulk of the story takes place with them just walking home and talking about names and talking about how names are musical, how names have fire in them, how names can come from dreamers. So all of these different things, the mom tries to encourage the girl to believe about her name and other names. They do all these different cultural names, Asian and Arab and Latinx names, African American and African names. They celebrate them, and basically the mom is convinced this little girl, who you don't get her name till the end, that her name is a song. So she is ready to go back to school the next day with this knowledge and ready to teach everybody, my name is a song and you're going to get it right. So
I absolutely love this book so much. And if you can't tell, you can see me smiling from ear to ear. And I think that's what's so beautiful about your book and all of your work, because there's so much emotion in the stories that you tell. And I know that many of the people who are reviewing this, teachers, of course, may want to go to Innovation Press, because that website, Jamilah was kind enough to put a link of a video reading and pronouncing some of the names. But more importantly, one of the things that you did there, you also did in the author's note in the book, which said, you want to talk a little bit about that, about how, this is just one way to pronounce a name.
Right. I mean, I did a lot of work trying to ensure that I was getting the pronunciations of the names right, some common pronunciations. But then I recognized, well, there are a lot of people who might have a name, it's spelled this way, but they don't pronounce their names that way. And I can't impose that on them. I can't say, well, in this culture, in this language, people say it this way, so you obviously must say your name this way. That's not fair. So it was really important to really emphasize that it's not just about how I'm saying or anyone is saying a name is pronounced, it's how that person who has the name is saying their name is pronounced. And it's important for us to ask them and to listen to how people want their names pronounced.
I think that's one of the most empowering parts of the story.
Thank you. I mean, that's great to, I'm just glad that we can start having these conversations, and that if my book does that, I'm excited.
On your page, on your website, where you do the pronunciation too, just every single name you share with such beauty and such joy, and your smile. And I think that's a piece that is so powerful too, because a smile is universal to all languages. And so if we can have that message resonate too, finding the joy and the beauty in every individual child in our class and in our community, in our world, I think we'll be hopefully moving in a better direction, because we need to be moving in a better direction, right?
Right. I mean, and that actually was very intentional. I realized that for the first few names, I had, I was smiling and saying the names, and then, after a while doing them, you start to like not smile, and I recognized that it was like, oh no, I gotta re-record this name, because I want every single name to feel like there's a smile with it, like I like this name, and really thinking about our faces. And I think that's important even for teachers. When we encounter a name, how are we, what are we projecting, with our body language, our facial, our faces when we're like looking at this name for the first time, our facial expressions. So, yeah, that was very intentional. It was like, I have to, every single one of these names deserves a smile. I picked each one of them for a reason. I can't just be like, oh, I'm tired now. Let me not read this name, the last name on the list, or something like Ziamara is just going to get nothing. Like I have to give it a smile. It deserves it. They're great names.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. I agree with you. And I think, that's what goes back to what influences our work in our classrooms, because we have to be intentional. Just as we're intentional in choosing and selecting the stories that we share, are we being intentional about everything that we do? So I use the term heart print books for books that leave that mark on our hearts. And this certainly is one of them. So I thank you for that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. You're welcome. Mama pointed up. Tell them that made-up names come from there. From the sky? The girl asked. Made-up names come from dreamers. Their real names were stolen long ago, so they dream up new ones. They make a way out of no way, make names out of no names, pull them from the sky. The girl reached up to pull names too. Tajay and Trayvon, they sit on clouds with Jelante. It continues, where mom is talking about how these kinds of names come from dreamers. And this was an important section for me to put into this book, because I don't think I've ever encountered in a picture book a celebration of African-American names that are, these kinds of names, right? These, Laquan, Lamika, the made-up names. And often children are shamed for having those names. There are a lot of, teacher forums, teachers make jokes about these names, they call them the ghetto names of this name, and it was just really important to me to put this section in and to lay that to rest, to kind of just say, wait a minute, these names, these names aren't shameful or bad. These are names that a people started coming up with because, they were taken from, their homeland, and their original names were taken from them, so this is a creative, almost a creative fix, right? And the phrase "make a way out of no way," that's often used by African Americans when we talk about, our struggles. That's why I wanted to put it in. It was like, make a way out of no way, make names out of no names, because that's part of that struggle. So it was really, really personal to me. And I had a number of critique partners. As writers, we have people who critique our work, and they didn't get it. They weren't Black, and they just didn't understand. This seems wordy. Why are we putting this phrase? What do you mean by make a way out of no way? And this section is extra long. And I just felt like, no, we need this section to be extra long, and we need all of it there, because there hasn't really been anything that speaks to that. We've had other books that celebrate, different cultural names, but not African-American names in that way. So I wanted to be very explicit and kind of even overdo it when it came to that section.
I love that, and I thank you for that.
One thing that's special is like the first name that gets mentioned in the book.
Olumide?
Yeah, it's the name that inspired me, that kind of got me started on this book. So Olumide is a melody. So Olumide is the name of a student, actually, that I had. So he actually had, it was his middle name. It's his middle name. I had him, he was in like an 11th grader or something like that. And his first name, everyone would mispronounce it. So he had like, everybody used the short name for it, it was like a common Muslim name. So I knew how to pronounce it. And then one day he told me his middle name and I thought it was so beautiful. I said, Olumide, Olumide. And then I looked up the meaning of it. And I said, I kept thinking, that name is like a song. And that's actually what sparked this book. So it ended up being the first name to go in the book, because I was like, I have to put Olumide in there. Olumide is a melody. So yeah.
Anything that you're working on?
I do have something coming out next year. So Abdul's Story is a book that is very much from my experience as a writing teacher. It's based on this little boy named Abdul. And Abdul has lots of great stories in his head, great stories to tell, but he is ashamed of his writing. He is ashamed of the way that he writes, the way that he spells things, his handwriting. It doesn't look right to him. And so he's ashamed to write his own stories down during writing time, during writing period in class every day. So Abdul's story is essentially about him finding the confidence to write his own story down. So see, that's coming out next year. So I'm really excited.
I'm excited for that one too. That sounds like it'll be another amazing co-teacher for reading and writing and life lessons. So thank you for that. And keep writing. The following literacy snapshots demonstrate ways to connect literacy and extend these conversations. Here you see students celebrating their names while also learning about letter sounds. Here, writers are sharing the stories of their names. Consider the ways you might invite your students to share more about who they are through poetry, art, or writing, so they can authentically see themselves in learning. When we use powerful picture books like Jamilah's Your Name is a Song, we can blur the lines between lessons in reading, writing, and life.
What makes this country great is the diversity that we have, is the variety of religions, is the variety of cultures.